It is 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started with the briefing on the Tropical Storm Francine updates. It has shifted a little bit to the east by about 50 miles, so that's probably the biggest change. There is no significant changes to the intensity forecast, but we'll talk about some of the changes to some of the impacts, mainly the wind and surge. Headlines have shifted a bit eastward and increased a little bit due to the latest track shift. So we'll go into all of that. Just a note that even though the last point is offshore, we're still forecasting it to be a Category 2 at landfall. It's just between those points. So I wanted to make sure that kind of mention that. But with the eastward shift in the track, those hazards and other concerns have shifted a bit eastward as well. So we'll get into all the details regarding that. And then we have expanded the wind and surge threats because of that. It is still in the southwest Gulf of Mexico. It did not strengthen overnight, but we are expecting it to strengthen as we move through the day today. And it is still expected to make landfall along the central Louisiana coastline, a bit east from the advisory yesterday. Are still expecting the most significant threats to be surge and rainfall, but the wind threat has also increased, so that is going to be a pretty big concern as well, especially for our western areas. So we'll talk about, how that's expanded as well. All of the watches that we had yesterday have been upgraded to warnings. And so we do have a hurricane watch, or I'm sorry, hurricane warning, basically including Baton Rouge, Houma, and all of our westernmost areas and coastal areas. And then everywhere else, we have a tropical storm warning. And so you can see that some of those have been expanded a little bit to the east. And you see that, like, for example, the Mississippi coast is now in that tropical storm warning. So that's something that we wanted to make sure that we, emphasized and pointed out. And so accordingly, because of the eastward shift, all those areas that were in the hurricane warning, basically, we're expecting the potential for winds 74 to 110 miles per hour. And then basically everywhere else in Southeast Louisiana. So basically, that includes like New Orleans, the North Shore, and, the Felicianas, et cetera, as well as our Southwest Mississippi areas, expecting the potential for winds 58 to 73 miles an hour. And then for our South Mississippi, or coastal Mississippi areas, expecting winds 39 to 57, potential for winds 39 to 57 miles an hour. So that has increased a little bit to the east for some areas, especially. Still expecting, the impacts mostly to be, power outages, downed trees, and some damage to mobile homes, and maybe some roof damage, and generally more widespread impacts the further west into our area you go. As far as the storm surge is concerned, all of the watches have been upgraded to warnings, and that has been expanded a bit to the east as well. So it does include the Mississippi coastal areas as well now. And so wanted to note that. In terms of the storm surge, the biggest difference here is going to be we did up the storm surge inside the lakes. So now you see Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Bourne and the Mississippi coast. That's all going to be 3 to 5 feet now. Everything else is pretty much the same as yesterday. Still expecting 5 to 10 feet of surge, 5 to 10 feet of inundation, basically from all of our westernmost coastal areas to Port Fourchon. And then from Port Fourchon to the mouth of Mississippi is going to be 4 to 7 feet, and then 2 to 4 from the mouth of Point Alahach, and then everything east of that's going to be 3 to 5 feet. So those are the biggest differences there, mainly just inside those lakes. This is the 50 knot, so the 58 mile an hour wind speed probabilities, and I'm just putting this out there to show you that the probabilities for damaging winds have increased and expanded a bit to the east as well from yesterday because of that track shift. And in terms of the timing for these winds, we are still expecting it to be We are still expecting conditions to start deteriorating late tonight, early tomorrow morning. And so the most likely time of arrival for these tropical storm force winds for coastal areas is going to be around 8 a.m. on Wednesday, around midday on Wednesday for areas like near the lake or say Baton Rouge, Mississippi coast, like I-10-12 corridor. And then by Wednesday evening, that's going to be the most likely time of arrival for the Southwest Mississippi areas. So we are still telling everyone to make sure that they have preparations in place by tonight. And the rainfall is a third threat that we are still pretty concerned with. You know, the potential for major flooding rain and inland rainfall is going to be a big concern as we have these bands move on shore starting tonight, but really the bulk of the rainfall is going to be tomorrow into Thursday. And the main impacts that we're worried about from this is going to be, you know, the potential for road closures, the potential for, you know, maybe some water evacuations depending on where these bands set up. Generally, 8 to 12 inches widespread across the area for majority of our area, with locally higher amounts definitely possible, and really want to emphasize that because as these bands set up, it's going to be pretty highly efficient rainfall. You could see a lot of rainfall in a short amount of time inside these bands as they move through. So you could see these rainfall rates 2 to 4 inches an hour. And so that's particularly going to be mainly a concern, especially for areas that see, you know, multiple bands set up over them, and as well as for our urban areas. So like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, the Mississippi coast, that's going to be a big concern for those areas as well. Mainly going to be a concern Wednesday and Wednesday night for the rainfall. And the other thing we want to mention, this will be a concern, albeit a secondary concern, but there will be the potential for several tornadoes tomorrow as it moves on shore and into tomorrow night as these bands kind of head on shore. So that will be definitely a concern to watch for as well. So overall, the impacts are increasing in terms of the likelihood as well as the magnitude. And so we are expecting to see more of these sustained hurricane force winds in our westernmost areas, and all of that has shifted further east as well. So you could see higher winds expected a little further east today than yesterday. So expecting that life-threatening storm surge, as well as the potential for the 8 to 12 inches of heavy rainfall. Again, that's going to be mainly for the urban areas, but also for areas that see multiple rounds of rainfall in the same locations. And then we are expecting the potential for a few tornadoes as well. So I'll open up for questions, but give me 1 second. Let me unmute y'all, and then